"Don't touch my car," the billionaire shouted at the homeless black man, not knowing this stranger was about to save his $4. $2 million hypercar and change his entire world view. Smoke poured from the Quantum Apex's engine in. The industrial district as tech titan Anthony Wright frantically dialed his phone. Nobody answered. The crowd grew. The proprietary engine, unfixable outside the factory, continued its death rattle. "Sir, your quantum thrust cooling system has a microfracture in the secondary loop," said the disheveled man, approaching with hands slightly raised. "I can fix it." Anoni's finger hovered over the security number. How could this man possibly know about technology so classified the manufacturer wouldn't even acknowledge it existed? What hidden genius was standing before him, and why was he living on the streets? In that brief instant, a fracture not just in the machine, but in Anthony's perception of the world, began to spread. The air reeked of burning polymer and overheating, coolant, the noise from the sputtering engine mixing with the low murmur of a fascinated crowd. The stranger's words cut through the haze like a scalpel, each syllable heavy with authority born of lived knowledge. Anthony's heartbeat thudded in his ears faster than the rhythm of the failing pistons. Here was a man dismissed by society, standing in rags, yet speaking with the kind of confidence reserved for top engineers behind guarded walls. What stories were carved into those lines on his face? What brilliance had been abandoned by boardrooms? Blinded by prejudice? And why, Anthony wondered, did he feel the unsettling suspicion that the universe had orchestrated this very meeting? The moment trembled with possibility, like an electrical circuit waiting for connection. In the next 60 seconds, everything Anthony believed about talent, worth, and judgment would shatter completely. Where are you listening from today? Drop a comment and subscribe to Beat Stories for moments of extraordinary justice that will change how you see the world. Thomas Johnson hadn't always lived on the streets. 3 years ago, he designed revolutionary cooling systems that transformed aerospace technology and saved countless lives. Now he slept under the open sky, an invisible man to the tech executives who rushed past without a glance. The morning had started like any other. Thomas woke at dawn in his carefully hidden spot behind the abandoned machine shop near Tech Row. He folded his tarp with military precision, a habit from his engineering days when precision meant survival. His routine was methodical. Wash up at the public restroom, brush teeth, and head to the library as soon as it opened. Knowledge remained his one connection to his former life. Thomas had been watching the distinctive Quantum Apex for weeks. These hypercars occasionally glided through the neighborhood on their way to the exclusive tech campus. He recognized the engine's unique purr. He should, considering he'd helped design its predecessor during his brief consultancy at Aerotech Industries before everything fell apart. MIT graduate, 3 engineering degrees, holder of 7 patents that generated millions for companies that no longer acknowledged his existence. The irony wasn't lost on Thomas that he could recite complex thermodynamic equations, but couldn't get past a hiring manager's prejudiced gaze. Overqualified, they said when they bothered to interview him. Not a cultural fit, they muttered when his credentials couldn't be denied. The real reasons hung unspoken in the air. A black man from the wrong side of town. No permanent address. The gap in his employment history after the false accusations that had destroyed his career. Thomas maintained his dignity despite it all. He volunteered teaching science to kids at the homeless shelter 3 nights a week. He read discarded tech journals found in recycling bins outside company headquarters. He kept his mind sharp despite the system designed to dull it. This morning, Thomas had noticed something wrong with the hypercar before it even pulled to the curb. The sound was off a subtle irregularity in the engine's rhythm that only someone intimately familiar with its design would recognize. The microfracture was developing in the exact spot the original blueprints had predicted weakness. Thomas had, flagged this in his report years ago, but his warnings had been brushed aside by executives eager to meet production deadlines. Now, one of those executives stood before a smoking multi-million-dollar testament to Thomas's ignored expertise. Thomas approached cautiously. He'd learned the hard way that his help wasn't always welcome, especially from those who judged books by their covers. His worn clothes and unkempt beard typically triggered security calls faster than his engineering insights triggered respect. He saw recognition flicker in Anthony Wright's eyes, not of Thomas as a person, but of Thomas as a threat. The billionaire's hand tightened around his phone. Thomas knew that gesture well. He'd seen it countless times over the past 3 years. What Anthony couldn't possibly know was that Thomas had once been invited to present at the same tech conferences where Anthony had been a keynote speaker. Their paths had nearly crossed 5 years ago before Thomas's life imploded over accusations later proven false, but not before his reputation was irreparably damaged. The tech world had a short memory for vindication, but a long one for scandal. Thomas watched the smoke pattern from the hypercar's engine. The color and density told him exactly which components were failing. He could fix it with basic tools and knowledge that apparently hadn't reached the current engineering team. Something compelled him forward despite knowing the likely reception. Maybe it was professional pride. Maybe it was the rare opportunity to prove his worth. Or maybe it was simply that Thomas Johnson, despite everything life had thrown at him, remained a problem solver at heart. Anthony Wright had just ended another fruitless call, his frustration evident as the gathering crowd whispered and pointed at the smoking luxury vehicle. The billionaire's reputation was on the line as much as his investment. Thomas took a deep breath and stepped forward. "Sir, I know what's wrong with your car," he said, keeping his voice steady and professional. "Your quantum thrust cooling system has a microfracture in the secondary loop." The words that came next would set in motion a chain of events that would change both their lives forever. Little did either man know that this chance encounter would expose not just a flaw in a luxury car, but in the very system that determined who deserved a second chance. Anthony Wright's day was imploding as spectacularly as his hypercar's cooling system. The quantum apex only 17 ever made had chosen the worst possible moment to break down. 3 hours before his presentation to potential investors, 2 mi from the nearest authorized service point, 0 cell reception. "Step back from the vehicle, please," Anthony said, not even looking Thomas in the eye. His voice carried the practiced authority of someone used to being obeyed without question. The crowd of onlookers had doubled in size. Phone cameras pointed at the spectacle of the smoking hypercar. Anthony Wright, tech wonderkind and founder of Nexus Innovations, stranded alongside his $4 $2 million status symbol, trending Twitter material within minutes. "Sir, I really can't help," Thomas persisted, maintaining a respectful distance. "That specific model has a known issue with the quantum thrust cooling system, the secondary loop. How would you know anything about this car?" Anthony cut him off, finally looking directly at Thomas. His gaze took in the worn clothes, the unkempt appearance, the reusable grocery bag that contained Thomas's worldly possessions. His expression shifted from frustration to dismissal in an instant. Thomas met his gaze steadily. "Because I helped design the prototype cooling system it's based on." A burst of laughter escaped Anoni's lips, sharp, incredulous cutting. Several onlookers joined in nervously. "Right. And I'm teaching rocket science at community college on weekends." Anthony turned away, focusing on his phone again. "Look, I appreciate you trying to whatever this is, but this vehicle contains proprietary technology. Even most mechanics can't service it." Thomas didn't move. "The fracture is causing coolant to leak into the tertiary chamber, which is why you're getting that specific shade of blue-gray smoke. If it continues, you'll have catastrophic engine failure in approximately 47 minutes. Anthony froze. The smoke was indeed blue-gray, and the vehicle's diagnostic system had given him a 45-minute warning before permanent damage would occur. "How did you?" he began, then stopped himself. His eyes narrowed with suspicion. Did someone put you up to this? Is this some kind of stunt? A sleek black SUV pulled up. Two security guards emerged private security from the nearby tech campus, responding to Anani's earlier call. Is there a problem, Mr. Wright? Asked the taller guard, eyeing Thomas with professional suspicion. This gentleman was just leaving, Anthony replied coldly. He seems to think he knows something about my car. I know the Quantum Apex uses a modified version of the Aerotech cooling system, Thomas said quickly. I know it has a design flaw that was identified in prototype stage but ignored due to production pressures. I know that internal memo XT447 documents the exact issue I'm describing. Anoni's face showed a flash of recognition at the memo number. That was proprietary information never made public. How could you possibly? He began. Mr. Wright, we should secure the area, interrupted the security guard. Your vehicle contains valuable intellectual property. Thomas stood his ground. You have approximately 45 minutes before that engine suffers irreparable damage. The service center can't help you. They don't have the parts or expertise for this specific issue. And towing this vehicle in its current condition will only accelerate the damage. Anthony hesitated, torn between prideful dismissal and the unsettling realization that this stranger's words carried more than idle speculation. Sir, the second security guard addressed Thomas firmly. I'm going to have to ask you to move along. Wait, Anthony raised a hand. You mentioned a memo XT447. How do you know about that? Because I wrote it, Thomas replied simply. 5 years ago when I was a consulting engineer at Aeroch. My name is Thomas Johnson. For a brief instant, recognition flickered like a ghost across Anthony's face, the name triggering a memory he couldn't quite anchor. The first guard stepped forward, his stance stiffening. Sir, final warning. Step away from Mr. Wright and his vehicle. Anthony checked his watch again, the second hand sweeping away precious time. Roadside support was hours away, his investors minutes from expecting him, and the smoke spiraled thicker into the gray sky. What exactly would you need to fix it? Anthony asked, ignoring the incredulous looks from the guards. Basic tools, Thomas said. Most are in your emergency kit. Give me 20 uninterrupted minutes. Anthony's jaw tightened as his thoughts collided. The surging crowd, the irreplaceable car, his looming meeting, and this unlikely figure who seemed to hold forbidden knowledge. Mr. Wright, we strongly advise against the security guard began. Check his ID first, Anthony cut in. Full background. The taller guard pulled Thomas aside while the other murmured into his radio. Thomas complied without protest, handing over his shelter card, his only proof of existence. The guard returned grim-faced. No residence, no employment record, a vague black mark in his past. Anthony's expression hardened, the risk gnawing at him. I'm sorry for the misunderstanding, he said to Thomas, his tone flat as steel. My team will handle this. Thomas watched the billionaire pivot away, already relegating him to the shadows. But what followed would prove how brittle first impressions could be, and how desperation rewrites choices. Anthony's phone rang. He snatched it up, hope etched across his face. Seconds later, it drained away. 2 hours? Unacceptable. The system's warning gave him less than 40. His pacing grew frantic, the whispers in the crowd sharpening. No, I understand it's proprietary. That's why I bought it from you. There has to be someone closer. Thomas remained silent, steady, watching the billionaire's fortress of certainty crumble with each failed option. The guards eased slightly, sensing the shifting tides. Fine, I'll wait, Anthony muttered, ending the call with frustration that bled into his voice. Useless. He glanced at his watch again, then back at the smoking beast of a car, its engine groaning. The guards exchanged wary looks. Sir, perhaps we should clear the area if there's a risk of fire. There won't be a fire, Thomas said calmly, his words cutting through tension. The smoke comes from coolant vaporizing against thermal shielding, not flames. The true danger lies in microscopic damage to the thrust bearings. Repairs will run about $870,000 if they shatter. Silence crashed over the group. How do you know the exact replacement cost? Anthony demanded. Because I helped calculate the original manufacturing specifications, Thomas said, voice measured. Those bearings are forged from an alloy produced in only 2 facilities on Earth. Lead time, 11 weeks. Anthony's skepticism warred with something else now. Intrigue. That's not public knowledge. No, it isn't, Thomas answered. The taller guard leaned close to Anthony. Sir, we could call the police if this man is harassing you. Anthony brushed it aside, his gaze locked on Thomas like a puzzle refusing to solve itself. You said your name is Thomas Johnson? Yes. And you claim you worked at Aeroch Industries. I didn't just work there. I led the thermodynamics team that built the cooling system your engine relies on. Thomas stated the facts plainly, without embellishment. Patent AT5729QX, filed 5 years ago. Your quantum apex is merely an evolution of that design. A flicker of shock betrayed Anthony's composure. That patent number wasn't the kind of detail an imposter could conjure. He stepped in closer, lowering his voice. If you are who you say, why are you... He hesitated, gesturing vaguely. Homeless. Thomas finished the word Anthony couldn't utter. False charges, boardroom politics, racial bias, a long story. What matters now is this. You have 35 minutes before the engine is destroyed, and I can save it. Anthony's eyes darted to his watch. The crowd swelled further, phones lifted high, and a blogger's lens glared at him, feeding the wildfire of exposure. His precious image eroded with every second. What exactly would you do? His voice cracked slightly, betraying the weight of decision. I'd access the secondary loop, flush the contaminated coolant, seal the fracture, and recharge the system. Thomas's tone carried the precision of a craftsman. With your kit and a few supplies from that corner store, I'd be done in 20 minutes. Impossible, Anthony scoffed, his disbelief cracking but not yet broken. The manufacturer insists specialized. Tools and controlled labs are required. They're exaggerating, Thomas countered. This is fluid dynamics at its core. Their fear of liability hides the simplicity. One of the guards, silent until now, spoke. Sir, I know this man. He teaches kids at the West Side shelter. A genius, they say. Thomas inclined his head in quiet acknowledgement. And he knows his stuff? Anthony pressed. The guard nodded. The shelter director says he's the real deal. Anthony paced like a man, caught between cliffs. The smoke thickened, the diagnostics ticking down to 31 minutes. Show me, he ordered. Not the fix. Just tell me step by step what's happening inside and what you do. Thomas moved closer, careful not to touch, his voice low but steady as he explained the system's anatomy. The thrust cooling relies on 3 interlocking circuits, primary, secondary, tertiary, each crafted for higher thermal thresholds. The secondary loop holds the specialized nanocoolant, engineered to absorb and distribute extreme heat that prevents, pointed with precision, is allowing that coolant to leak into the tertiary chamber where it's vaporizing on contact with the thermal shielding. Anani's expression shifted from skepticism to astonishment as Thomas narrated the system, like a man reading his own creation's blueprint, naming components, detailing their placement, and explaining subtle metallurgical variations invisible to the untrained eye. Every word rang with the authority of experience, not speculation. The factory procedure demands full disassembly because they plan for the worst-case contamination scenario, Thomas clarified. But with this exact leak behavior, we can target the fracture, apply thermal bonding, and restore the seal without ripping the entire system apart. Anthony's technical background allowed him to sense the brilliance behind the explanation, enough to know he wasn't being conned. And where would you even get thermal bond sealant now? Anthony challenged, his doubt edged with desperation. Thomas smiled faintly, the first trace of levity cutting through the tension. Your emergency kit should carry a small reserve. Combine it with nanoparticle graphite from a very specific pencil brand at that convenience store, and we can create a workable seal that will hold until proper service. Anthony blinked. You're telling me you'll repair a multi-million-dollar hypercar with pencil graphite of a particular density and distribution? Exactly. With the sealant and careful conditions, Thomas confirmed, shrugging lightly. Engineering is rarely about luxury tools. It's about solving what's in front of you with whatever you can muster. The guards exchanged glances, their hostility softening into something nearer to respect. Even the crowd hushed, drawn into the strange theater unfolding. Anthony glanced at the countdown again. 28 minutes to catastrophe. His investors would expect him in less than 3 hours. The service team would never make it. This eccentric fix was his only shot. If you damage my car, Anthony began stiffly. It's already compromised, Thomas interrupted gently, and worsening by the second. The question is whether you'll let me stop it before failure. Anthony inhaled deeply, then pulled the hood release. Fine. Let's see what you can do with pencils and desperation. But neither man could fathom how the decision about to unfold would reverberate far beyond a single car. The hood of the Quantum Apex rose with a pressurized hiss, revealing a labyrinth of polished machinery, futuristic alloys, and circuitry gleaming with menace and beauty. The crowd gasped at the rare glimpse into technological royalty. Thomas advanced slowly, eyes scanning with surgical focus. I'll need your emergency kit, he said briskly. All business now that permission was granted. Anthony retrieved a carbon fiber case from the trunk, handing it over with reluctant trust. Thomas snapped it open, cataloging tools with the quickness of muscle memory. This will handle most of what we need. One of your guards must fetch the pencils. Stedler Mars Lumograph 8B grade. The shorter guard glanced at Anthony, who nodded tightly. Move fast. As the guard vanished, Thomas arranged his instruments neatly, his motions deliberate, betraying the discipline of long years in labs. Anthony watched in fascination as this ragged figure unfolded into a master of his craft, movements precise, purposeful, assured. The microfracture should appear once I remove this panel, Thomas explained, selecting a slim tool. The coolant leaves an invisible trail, a residue pattern unique to the leak. Anthony found himself nodding unconsciously, his skepticism grudgingly eroding. How long did you say you worked at Aeroch? 3 years leading thermal engineering plus 2 years consulting, Thomas replied without pausing, before adding more quietly. Until the incident that erased my career. What incident? Anthony pressed. Thomas paused, just long enough for silence to sharpen the air. A prototype failure pinned on my team. Later evidence proved it was management overriding our safety protocols, but by then, my name was Ash. His. Hand stayed steady. These panels resist tampering. May I borrow your phone's flashlight? Anthony obliged, his screen illuminating the engine's hidden skeleton. A faint hiss leaked as Thomas removed the access cover. There it is, he said, pointing to the hairline crack, vapor curling from the wound. Precisely where I said. That tiny scar is causing all this? Anthony asked, disbelief laced with awe. Under these pressures, even a threadline fissure unravels stability, Thomas began, when a sharp voice cut them short. What the hell is going on here? A tall man in an immaculate suit muscled through the crowd, flanked by guards. His badge gleamed. Executive Security. Tech Horizon. Mr. Wright, he said, we received reports of tampering with your car. Our CEO dispatched me to intervene immediately. Anthony straightened. Reynolds, thank you, but it's under control. This man is handling a repair. Reynolds' eyes swept over Thomas with disdain. Protocol prohibits outsiders from touching proprietary systems, he snapped. Especially, he didn't finish, but the sneer did. He knows exactly what he's doing, Anthony countered, though his confidence had weakened. With respect, Mr. Wright, Reynolds dropped his voice. This car contains tech worth millions. We cannot let an unknown tamper unchecked. I'm not unknown, Thomas replied, working calmly. And we have 18 minutes before irreversible collapse. Reynolds moved in, hand brushing Thomas's arm. Sir, step away now. The returning guard, clutching the package of pencils, froze on the edge, unsure. Reynolds, please, Anthony began. But the chief cut him off sharply. Mr. Wright, we've thwarted 3 espionage attempts this quarter alone. How do you know this isn't one? How do you know he hasn't staged this entire scene? Doubt resurfaced in Anthony's eyes, the seed sprouting again. The crowd thickened, every phone raised, capturing what could wreck his reputation and his company's credibility. Perhaps we should wait for the manufacturer, Anthony murmured, conviction draining. Thomas looked up, dignity etched in his face despite rejection. In 15 minutes, it will be far too late. Sir, Reynolds warned, step back, or we'll remove you by force. Thomas placed the tools down, rising slowly. Mr. Wright, I understand. But you must understand this. He gestured deep inside the machine. That unit is your quantum stabilizer. In 14 minutes, the leaking coolant will hit its critical temperature, triggering a cascade collapse. At that point, it's not bearings you'll lose, but the entire core, 3 months' work, minimum. Anthony wavered, visibly split. Reynolds pressed harder. Mr. Wright, the police are already en route. This man has no ID, no authorization, no right. He could be worsening the damage as we speak. I've at least identified the fault, Thomas murmured, voice even. That alone may aid the factory team. He began stepping back, pride intact despite the sting of dismissal. The guard carrying the pencils finally approached Anthony, speaking in a lowered tone. Sir, I called the shelter while I was... They confirmed he teaches engineering there. The coordinator said he's some kind of genius. Former MIT professor or something. The car's diagnostic system chimed an alert. Warning, 12 minutes to critical system failure. With security approaching and his reputation on the line, Thomas made a bold claim that would either vindicate him or confirm everyone's worst assumptions. Mr. Wright, make one call to verify who I am. Just one. Call Dr. Eleanor Chen at Space, Tech Industries. Tell her Thomas Johnson is here. The atmosphere tightened until it felt like the entire block had stopped breathing. Anthony weighed the risk in silence, his face caught between doubt and reluctant curiosity. Reynolds and his men stood stiff, ready to eject Thomas with force if necessary. The crowd hushed, phones raised like an audience before a stage. Dr. Eleanor Chen, the chief engineer at Space Tech? Anthony asked, incredulity cracking his composure. Thomas gave a single nod. Tell her I'm here. She'll know the truth. Anthony hesitated only a moment before fishing out his phone, scrolling his contacts with a thumb that shook ever so slightly. The ease with which he accessed Space Tech's top engineer underscored his status. This is Anthony Wright, he said into the receiver. Forgive the intrusion, Dr. Chen. But something unusual has happened. He glanced sideways at Thomas. There's a man here who claims to know you, says he's Thomas Johnson. The reaction was instantaneous. Anthony's features shifted as the voice on the other end rushed through, his eyes widening with each word. The guards looked to one another uneasily as seconds stretched into an agonizing minute. Occasionally, Anthony's gaze darted to Thomas, softening in ways it hadn't before. Yes, he's here, Anthony finally said. Would you mind speakerphone? He pressed the button, lowering the device between them. Thomas? Thomas Johnson? Can it truly be you? The voice was crisp, authoritative, but tinged with disbelief. "Hello, Eleanor," Thomas answered, a faint smile touching his lips. "It's been some time. 3 years, 4 months, and about 22 days. Dr. Chen's response was immediate, a mix of relief and accusation. "You vanished." "We searched," Thomas replied evenly. "It's a long story." "I'm sure it is," she returned, her tone sharpening. "Anthony, do you realize who stands before you? Thomas Johnson is the most brilliant thermal engineer I've ever known. His cooling systems revolutionized aerospace design. We still rely on his patents." Anthony's astonishment deepened visibly. "He claims he can repair my quantum apex, that a microfracture plagues its secondary cooling loop. If Thomas says so, then it's fact," Dr. Chen declared firmly. "Aerotech built your car's system on his blueprints." Reynolds shifted uncomfortably. The guard who fetched the pencils now lingered near Thomas with quiet deference. "The thing is," Anthony pressed, lowering his voice, "he appears homeless," Thomas supplied, before he could stumble further. "I've lived on the streets 3 years, Eleanor." A hush fell over the line. "Impossible. You had offers from every major player after Aerotech. I sent you one myself. As I said, it's complicated. But what matters is this. Mr. Wright's car has 9 minutes left. If your word carries weight, he may allow me to act." The diagnostic tone chimed again, almost theatrically. "Warning, 9 minutes to critical system failure." "Anthony." Dr. Chen's tone cut through steel. "Let him repair it. He's not just capable. He's the foremost authority alive on this. Technology. I trust him with spacecraft worth billions. Trust him with a car." Anthony stared at Thomas, eyes shifting, perspective unraveling. "If you are who she says, how did you—" Thomas met his gaze. "False charges, prejudice, a system that buries people who slip without credit, address, or phone. Getting back up becomes impossible. But this isn't the moment for injustice debates. We have a car to save." Anthony nodded, chastened. "Reynolds, stand down." "Dr. Chen, thank you." "Wait," she cut in. "Thomas, when this ends, call me. We've kept a place open. Always." Thomas inclined his head. "I'll think about it." "Goodbye, Eleanor." Anthony ended the call, turning to Thomas with contrition. "I owe you an apology." "You owe me the chance to finish what I began," Thomas corrected, already reaching for the hood. "And the pencils, please." The guard hurried forward, offering the package. Thomas's eyes scanned it, and he pulled a single pencil, nodding. "Perfect." As he bent again to the engine, the crowd's whispers shifted, now tinged with admiration. Even Reynolds, though unconvinced, had stepped back. "How will this work?" Anthony asked, curiosity finally outweighing arrogance. "The sealant in your kit is meant for temporary patchwork," Thomas explained, deftly working as he spoke. "Infused with this graphite's exact density, it will chemically bond with the alloy in the secondary loop." He mixed carefully, hands steady, precision in every gesture. "The mixture will form a bond strong enough to withstand the enormous thermal and pressure loads until a proper rebuild." Anthony's eyes widened. "And you devised this yourself?" "Necessity breeds invention," Thomas replied, his tone edged with quiet pride. "Years in experimental labs teach improvisation." The system chimed again. "Warning, 6 minutes to critical system failure." Thomas glanced up. "Silence is crucial now. I have one shot at this." Anthony raised his hands, ordering the crowd back. "Even," Reynolds complied. The street fell still, 50 witnesses holding their breath as a homeless man leaned into a $4 million machine, his hands moving with the finesse of a surgeon. On Anthony's phone, a document glowed, a patent in Thomas's name, proof of authorship over the very system he now sought to save. The following minutes stretched thin as glass. Thomas worked with calm mastery, each action measured, each tool placed with care. Nearly 50 strangers stood transfixed, watching what felt less like a repair and more like a performance of technological surgery on one of the world's most exclusive vehicles. Anthony checked his watch compulsively, glancing between the time and the diagnostic readout on his phone. 4 minutes to failure. 3 minutes. The smoke had lessened, but warning lights continued to scream danger across the glowing display. "I need more light," Thomas muttered, his eyes never leaving the complex weave of machinery before him. Immediately, 3 spectators leaned forward, holding out their phones like torches, eager to assist in this unfolding drama that felt more like theater than repair. "Almost finished," Thomas whispered. "The fracture is stabilized. Now I have to vent the tainted coolant and re-establish stable pressure." His hands reached deep into the intricate engine bay, each movement precise, like a conductor guiding a symphony. A thin trickle of shimmering fluid drained into a makeshift container fashioned from the kit's carbon case, its surface glinting in unnatural hues. "That's the nano coolant?" Anthony asked, his wonder momentarily overtaking the anxiety in his voice. "Yes, about $20,000 worth," Thomas replied evenly. "We're salvaging roughly 60%, better than I predicted." Anthony raised a brow. "You even know its cost?" "I helped invent it," Thomas said with quiet pride. "The price may have risen, but it has always demanded specialized fabrication to maintain quantum stability." The alert chimed again. Warning: 2 minutes to catastrophic failure. Yet Thomas remained unshaken, working with the composure of someone who understood this system more intimately than its designers. He siphoned in the reserve coolant from the kit. "Standard grade," he explained calmly. "Not ideal for secondary channels, but stable enough until the nanofluid is replaced. Keep it under 70% output." Anthony nodded, marveling at how this man, dismissed minutes ago, now commanded mastery over secrets entire corporations guarded. 30 seconds, the system warned. Thomas tightened one final fitting and resealed the panel with deliberate care. "Start it," he said firmly. Anthony froze. "Are you certain? If it misfires—" "Start it," Thomas repeated, his tone sharp with authority. Anthony pressed ignition. A pause. Silence stretched taut. Then the engine roared awake, not in smoke and chaos, but in the crystalline hum of technology reborn. The high whine settled into a deep, confident purr. The diagnostic screen flickered, stabilizing, cooling operational. Capacity limited to 70%. Service recommended. The crowd erupted in applause, phones capturing the impossible. Anthony stared in disbelief. "That's not possible," he muttered. "The manufacturer swore this couldn't be fixed outside their labs. They complicate it to protect their monopoly," Thomas said, wiping his hands with clinical calm. "The truth is simple once you understand the fundamentals." Anthony's eyes softened with new respect. "How long will it hold?" 3 weeks, Thomas replied. "Graphite infusion should hold that long if you keep load limits. Enough time for proper service." Anthony exhaled, then extended his hand. "Thank you, truly." Thomas shook it, his expression restrained. "You're welcome." The moment could have ended there. 2 men from different worlds linked by necessity, but Anthony's mind refused to stop racing. "I need to know more," he pressed. "About this fix, about you. Come with me, my office. Let's talk." Thomas hesitated, but Anthony leaned forward. "At minimum, I owe you proper compensation. And after Dr. Chen's endorsement, I have more questions than answers." Reynolds cleared his throat. "Mr. Wright, your investor meeting is 90 minutes away. We need to leave soon." Anthony frowned, torn, then brightened suddenly. "Come with me to the meeting. Investors are funding a quantum thermal regulation system. Your expertise could be invaluable." Thomas shook his head. "I'm hardly dressed for an investor gathering." Anthony glanced at his watch, already calculating. "We'll fix that. Reynolds, call Bespoke on 5th. Their finest. Ready in 30 minutes. Thomas's size. Full attire. Reynolds hesitated, then obeyed. Thomas raised an eyebrow. Unnecessary. Consider it payment, Anthony countered, and imagine their faces when I tell them who fixed the unfixable. For the first time, Thomas smiled openly. That might be worth it. Anthony returned the grin, but his tone turned serious. I still don't understand. How did your life collapse? After Aerotech? Thomas's features darkened. It's not a tale I enjoy revisiting. I'd still like to hear it, Anthony pressed. But first, a test. Another? Thomas asked dryly. I thought I passed one with your car. You did, Anthony said. But I need to know if your brilliance carries over to my projects. Come to this meeting. Hear the thermal system pitch. If you can identify flaws and suggest improvements, I'll hire you as consultant on the spot. Thomas searched Anthony's face, probing for insincerity. And if I refuse? Then I'll pay you what's fair for the rescue, Anthony replied. But something tells me you'll want in. The next 20 minutes held a transformation no one would have believed. The man once shunned as invisible emerged from Bespoke's private suite reborn. The tailored charcoal suit hugged his form, his beard, trimmed to sharp dignity, his hair neatly styled. His presence filled the room, commanding, magnetic, a man reintroduced to the world. Anthony gave a satisfied nod. Now you look the part of the engineer you've always been. Thomas adjusted his cufflinks with measured precision. Appearances deceive. That's the point of this story, isn't it? Touché, Anthony admitted. But in 40 minutes, you'll prove substance outweighs image. Their SUV glided toward Nexus Innovations. Thomas gazed out at streets by 26, he usually walked, consultant to Aerotech at 29. Glass. He looked the same guards who once tried to drag him away. You disappeared from the industry completely 3 years ago. Anthony, Thomas nodded without elaboration, broke the auth scandal. Anthony MIT, pressed, top of your class. You mentioned 3 patents before graduation. Lead thermal. My assistant uncovered reports of a failed prototype, huge losses, and your name attached. I became the convenient scapegoat, Thomas admitted quietly. Management had pushed past our safety warnings to meet deadlines. Investigators later confirmed it, but by then my reputation was destroyed. Surely other companies would have recruited you, Anthony asked. Dr. Chen seemed eager. Thomas gave a rueful smile. When you're painted as the one who cost millions, opportunity vanishes. Add racial bias, whispered rumors of arrogance, and suddenly doors lock shut. But that doesn't explain homelessness for years, Anthony prodded gently. No, Thomas agreed. Depression, dwindling savings, and a system that keeps people down once they've fallen. That's the part no one tells you. He turned from the window, eyes steady. Do you realize how impossible it is to land a job without an address, phone, or fresh clothes? The very credentials that impressed you earlier become suspect, even considered fabricated. Anthony shifted uncomfortably. I think I'm starting to. See? They reached Nexus Innovations headquarters with minutes to spare. As they crossed the lobby, employees turned their heads, not for Anthony, but for the commanding figure at his side. Thomas, this is Sophia Reyes, our CTO, Anthony introduced. Sophia, meet Thomas Johnson. Recognition lit Sophia's face at once. The Thomas Johnson from Space Tech. Thomas inclined his head politely. Another lifetime, perhaps. Your quantum thermal work reshaped everything, she said, admiration coloring her voice. We expanded on your breakthroughs for our latest systems. That's why he's here, Anthony explained. He just rescued my quantum apex with a repair the manufacturer swore was impossible. I want his perspective on our new thermal project. Sophia's eyes widened. You repaired the secondary loop in the field? With what tools? Pencils and emergency sealant, Thomas answered calmly. Sophia blinked, then broke into delighted laughter. Of course. Graphite nanostructures would bind perfectly to the sealant's polymer chains. Ingenious. She shook her head. Why didn't we think of it? Sometimes the obvious hides in plain sight, Thomas replied. Anthony checked his watch. Investors are waiting. Inside the conference room, chatter faded as a dozen sharp-suited investors eyed the newcomer. Anthony stepped forward boldly. Ladies and gentlemen, before we begin, meet Thomas Johnson, the original inventor of the cooling system that revolutionized aerospace, and the man who just saved my unfixable car with ingenuity and pencil lid. The significance stretched beyond a car repair. As realization of Thomas's brilliance and injustice sank in, the meeting turned historic. Nexus presented their quantum computing thermal system, while Thomas listened keenly, jotting notes with crisp precision. Invited to comment, he spoke for 7 exact minutes, exposing 3 design flaws, offering elegant fixes, and sketching a 34% efficiency boost that also cut costs. The room froze in silence, then burst into urgent questions. Hours later, investors pledged expanded funding. Anthony shut the door and faced Thomas, all plain in his features. Extraordinary, he said. You didn't just refine our design, you elevated it. Sophia believes we've leapt years ahead. Thomas remained modest. Your team built a strong base. I added perspective. Anthony leaned closer. As promised, consulting role, name your fee. Thomas's gaze grew thoughtful. I'm grateful, but consulting isn't what I'm seeking. Then full-time. Director of Engineering, complete authority. It isn't about position or control, Thomas said firmly. It's about addressing the deeper failure. How many others like me are being wasted? He leaned forward. At the shelter, I've met former doctors, programmers, engineers. Brilliant minds ground down by the same barriers that buried me. Anthony's eyes sharpened. You mean something larger than just employment? Exactly. Thomas drew worn papers from his pocket, creased sketches filled with precise technical diagrams. These are patents I've drafted over 3 years, scribbled on recycled paper. Solutions to problems your field hasn't solved yet. Anthony's astonishment grew. These are groundbreaking, especially this one. Cooling for neural quantum networks. I had time to think, Thomas said simply. Imagine what more could exist if people like me had support. Multiply that by thousands left invisible. Anthony lowered the papers slowly. What are you suggesting? An innovation hub? Thomas replied without pause. A center not just for technology, but for human potential. A place to identify overlooked talent, to give them tools and resources to rise regardless of background. You want my money? Anthony asked. I want partnership, Thomas corrected. My vision and experience. Your resources and network. Together. Anthony studied him intently. Not revenge, not personal redemption, systemic change. Exactly, Thomas's voice rang with passion. The real tragedy isn't my homelessness. It's that society wasted my potential and continues wasting countless others. Anthony extended his hand. Then Thomas Johnson, you've just found a partner. The patents Thomas sketched while homeless on discarded scraps were worth more than the hypercar he had repaired. Yet their true value lay in the movement they could ignite, a movement that might save an industry from its blindness. Because brilliance often hides in unexpected places, dismissed by shallow judgments. The true test of society isn't in rewarding the privileged, but in recognizing genius wherever it surfaces. This isn't just about Anthony and Thomas. It's about you and what possibilities you may overlook in others, or others may overlook in you. If this story resonated with you, subscribe to Beat Stories, where we shine light on extraordinary, justice and transformation. Share your story in the comments. And never forget, the next world-changing idea could emerge from the very person society has taught you to ignore. Stay tuned. The story continues when truth finally finds visibility.